3, 2, 1. And we are live back at it again with another episode. This is episode 4 of Lockdown Podcast, our Lockdown Talks. I hope you guys have been enjoying it so far. I've been enjoying it. Actually talking about all the stuff that's actually on my mind and unloading. It's been pretty, how can I put it? Pretty refreshing actually to know that I guess the subconscious part of my brain is actually still thinking about all these different issues that's been on my mind for a very, very long time. For this 4th episode, I'd like to delve into a book that I read about a year ago by Lewis House, and it's called The Mask of Masculinity. This is what it looks like. Yeah, this is I've been following Lewis House for about don't know how long, maybe like about 2 to 3, 4 years now. He's been in my radar for about 4 years, but I went and got his book about last year when I was in a part of my manlyhood journey of trying to discover what it meant to be a man. And so that was a perfect book for me personally, because I resonated so much with what he had to say in terms of like all the different masks that he had pinpointed through his life growing up as a male. I wish I was shown this book when I was like 12 or even like earlier than that. Especially, growing up in New Zealand, especially as a Pacific male, especially as a male who, played rugby growing up and stuff. It was all about how strong you were. And just to be fucking straight up, it was all about like how many attractive women you could sleep with. It was about like how skilled you were at like fixing things up. It was about how strong you were. It was about how physically fit you were. Like these are the different cultural components that have been entrenched in us young males from a very, very young age. And right now it almost sounds ridiculous to question all of that stuff. I mean, to me at least, right? Because it's just been a part of being a man, and so like the different things that we weren't taught when we were growing up were things like, it wasn't okay to be afraid. It wasn't okay to be too emotional as a man. That was a feminine thing, or that was a female or woman's thing to do. It was never about the journey. It was always about like, the destination of like being first, being the best. And also like one of the most important ones was like, it was never about like showing your emotions in terms of like crying, right? I do know that like it's an actual fact that men actually don't feel the need to cry as much as females do, and but I do know that we suppress it a lot more than females, and so that has been an issue that I never really understood. I know like growing up it was always about like just handle the pain, take it on the chin and move forward. It was never about like addressing how you felt within certain circumstances and scenarios, and let's reflect on it. Like, how did you feel? It was never anything like that encouraged us to do shit, And it wasn't until I ran into this book called The Mask of Masculinity where I started to, where things started to make sense a lot more, and I'd like to share the 9 different masks that Lewis House pinpointed as something that a lot of us males do use to a certain degree. This is definitely a generalization as well. I know that like there are some males out there that are very aware of the different masks that they use consciously as well. The thing about these masks is that it's okay to use these masks, but if it's hurting yourself and if it's hurting other people, then that's when it becomes a problem. And so I like to go through the different masks. So the first mask is the stoic mask. The stoic mask is basically somebody who doesn't want to be seen as somebody who's struggling. And an example would be like, somebody who's gone through a lot of trauma and stuff, and so they keep a straight face. And I think that's pretty straightforward. I know that there's a lot of people that either have that stoic mask really, really tightly attached to them, or they know somebody that has that stoic mask. The second one is the athletic mask, which is basically using your athletic ability. Your self-worth is attached to how athletic you are. So, for example, like a rugby player or a football player or a basketball player could use that as something that they tie their whole ego to. Third mask is the materialistic mask, and so basically it's just like wearing like gold chains and Lacoste polos and caps to maybe mask something else that's going deep, that's happening deep within, like your struggles and stuff. It reminds me of that saying that like money doesn't buy happiness. The fourth mask is the sexual mask, which is like basically the number of women that you've slept with is attached to your ego, and so you use that as a tool to become a man, or you think that you're becoming a man by the amount of women that you sleep with. The aggressive mask is the fifth one, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically being angry, pissed off, being fucked off, and just not addressing what you're really feeling deep down inside. So you just burst out. The Joker mask is basically suppressing how you truly feel sometimes, and you try and twist it to make a joke out of the situation. And so, like, a lot of people, I've seen it within our own communities where they like use their weight as a punchline, but like, deep down they're like really hurt, you know what I mean? It could be like it's a coping mechanism, right? Like for a lot of us. And so, like, I think humor can only take you so far. If you're not addressing a lot deeper than what's actually happening on the surface, or how it's affecting you by using the Joker mask, then that's when it becomes a problem. But it's definitely like a self-reflection thing where you have to really become aware of your situation as well. Because I love humor as well. Like, fuck. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that like I'll do something funny on my Instagram, right? Well, I like to think that I'm funny. People laugh at it, so there, it's funny, okay? Okay, so we've got the invincible mask as well, which is the no fear risk taker. Somebody who likes to be seen as like somebody who's like super risky, like, whoa, crazy man, like you did all of that, bro, you're like the man. And then the know-it-all mask, which is I like to think that I use that quite a bit of a flex of my brain sometimes, and I know that sometimes I use my knowledge to my advantage as well, which is something that I'm working on too. Like I've seen it in actually different spaces, and it's actually quite disgusting sometimes, eh? So you reflect on yourself and go like, is that how I really look like? If I was to reach a point where everything that I knew was used as a tool to, I guess, like slither my way into like or slither my way out of certain scenarios, And then you have the alpha mask, which is the final mask, number 9. And that one's basically like, you want to be the leader. You want to be seen as like, the top. Michael Jordan is definitely like an example who uses that mask as his alter ego to be a winner. And I would say like I don't think it's a bad thing. Like these masks, just to reiterate, these masks aren't seen as like as being bad. I think what the point of pinpointing what these masks are makes you a lot more aware of how you're navigating yourself through life. And I think this is also a part of the journey of being vulnerable, because I feel like if you are just putting on this mask as like a tough guy, or a rich person, and say, for example, let's say that you're a rich person, and like your whole image of who you are is actually placed in the stuff that you own. And then just imagine, the next day you just get robbed of all your money. What happens then? Do you feel like your whole life is down the drain because your whole self-worth was invested in this mask of having a lot of stuff, And so that's why I think it's really important just to make yourself aware of what sort of masks that you are using. A very important learning point for me, reading all of these different masks and just self-reflecting, was this idea of how you look from the outside. And I think everybody is able to resonate with that. Deep inside how you feel, deep inside the things that you like, deep inside the things that you want as well. And so sometimes you subconsciously think about how you look from the outside. And so if your real self doesn't match what you really want, if that makes sense. So, like, say for example, I'm going to use myself for example, right? Let's just say that girls love boys who run a lot. That this is going on in my head, right? And so what I would do is okay, this is a scenario. I didn't actually think this. I do running purely for myself. Let's say that is exactly what I think. And so therefore, I will always be putting out stuff around the amount of kilometers that I run, my speed that I run, how frequent I run, and I make sure that it goes out there. So, because I want women to see that, right? And so that's an image that I would put out, because my agenda is I want girls. But the things that happen, like, while I'm in that situation, is like, man, I'm really struggling. Fuck, I like cried halfway through this run because it was really hard. Before my fourth run this week, I was really feeling down and blue, and I had a little bit of a cry before I went out and run. Like all these different things. These are this is your real self, and these are the things that you don't want to tell people, because as a man, we've been programmed to think that being emotional isn't a manly thing. And so you will only put on these masks that suit an ideal self-reflection of how you want yourself to be seen to other people, if that makes sense. And so obviously, you want yourself to be seen as like successfully fit, really strong, stoic. At the end of every run, you're like, man, that was easy. That's an example of how people use the mask in a really detrimental way to your health, really, to your well-being. When reflecting on the different masks that you use, is to really figure out why you use the mask. I come back to the example of, having a lot of money. You're wanting people to know that you're well off and you're healthy and you're not struggling out here, but deep down, there may be other things that are happening. And so, like, the question that I want to leave for everybody is like, why do you do the things that you do? Be aware of it as well. Like, it's a hard one, man. It's definitely like a really difficult situation. It's a process that involves being aware of your behavior, which can often be very challenging and confronting as well, because and you use these masks for so long, you begin to, I guess, morph into this self-projection of yourself, and upon reflecting, you begin to realize, like, fuck, this really isn't me. And if you can't figure out why you're doing something beyond your agenda, then it might make sense, or might be worth actually delving into this a lot more. You might be delving in with your like friends and family members, figuring out, why you do certain things the way that you do. I mean, let's be honest, how many men that are watching this right now have ever, how often do you guys talk to your own mates around like how you guys are feeling in terms of like a certain situation, things that have broken you down really bad? I can say that it wasn't really a thing that we have been programmed to do. I've seen like groups pop up here and there, but I just don't think it's doing enough. I mean, the numbers are reflected in the amount of suicides that we've been seeing amongst our men. I mean, I'm seeing the push-up challenge, which is awesome, but I'm seeing a lot of critique around, is this fixing suicide? I don't like. I see both points, right? Like, I don't think it's fixing the suicide, but just typing it out on your computer is actually a massive step relative to what we had been doing before, right? Like, I can admit that I'm a 26-year-old male, and I find it really difficult to uncondition myself out of the things that I've been taught as a young kid, to man up when you feel so weak, when you feel so hurt, because what we've been taught is the only way to get over that is to be aggressive and to show strength, show heart, when in actual fact the heart bit comes from saying no. Like, I just feel like I need a rest, or I just feel like I want to reflect on what I'm going through right now because I'm having a really hard time. We're not conditioned to do that. And so, like, when you look at the amount of depressed men globally, especially in New Zealand, we'll come from a tough country, There's only a limited amount of ways where you can compensate for not being strong or not being athletic, How do you get to a point where when you're feeling so just fucked, mentally fucked, and you feel like the pressure is just too much, how do you get to into a position or a mind state where you can just say, hey, I just don't feel well in this certain circumstance. I feel like there's too much pressure. We don't hear that enough amongst our men as well, which is why it's projected in the amount of suicides in New Zealand. And how do you come from a place of love, and compassion? Because who are you trying to prove? What are you trying to prove by suppressing your emotions and just manning up? I myself, I do see the positives in being a man, in the sense of like, just mustering up the courage and just taking that step forward. But sometimes, actually, a lot of the times, it can be way too much for us men. And I think we need to learn to distinguish when it's hindering our growth or when it's not hindering our growth, and when it's actually growing us as a person, and not in a toxic way, but in a way that helps us to grow emotionally. It's just as important to be emotionally strong and equipped when you're in situations at the top of your game or something. That was intense. Fuck, that was intense. All right. Yeah, man, again, this is definitely like a very fucking intense issue to talk about. And also it's at the surface level, I've got into some deeper conversations around this topic, and it's been super emotional, this journey, I'm not gonna lie. Shed a lot of tears of boys and stuff. And you do come out a lot more freer. You do come out a lot more stronger. I can definitely say that. And like, I would say that I'm a male that's gone through actually a lot of pain, physical pain. You know, I've got this like, I've got the peta, you know. I've gone through 2 marathons, and fuck, that pain is nothing compared to like the emotional baggage that you carry around. Hey, and once you let it go, it's honestly, you feel way more freer, and like this pain is nothing. So men, this goes out for you especially. Be vulnerable. Know when, you know, when you're having a hard time, and just, you know, try and just look after each other, because you know, it's definitely a hard upbringing that we've been taught to do, and so how can we make it better for our future kids and our future men and leaders of our world? Yeah, and thanks so much for watching this episode. This is episode 4. Hope you guys have a really good day. Peace. Woo, that was intense.